This is for educational use only. Our group is allowing our instructor Mr. Roldan Ardinas to use this as an educational material.
Hello everyone, we are Group 4 and our topic is Contemporary Global Governance amid integration of COVID-19. So the learning outcomes is gain understanding about challenges of global governance and amid the COVID-19 pandemic, enumerate the effects of globalization in governments, identify the institutions that govern international relationships, lastly differentiate internationalism from globalism. So first is, what is global governance? Global governance brings together diverse actors to coordinate collective action at the level of the planet. The goal of global governance, roughly defined, is to provide global public goods, particularly peace and security, justice and mediation systems for conflict, functioning markets, and unified standards for trade and industry. One crucial global public goods is catastrophic risk management, putting appropriate mechanisms in place to maximally reduce the likelihood and impact of any event that could cause the death of 10% of humanity across the planet or damage of equivalent magnitude. The leading institute in charge of global governance today is the United Nations. It was founded in 1945 in the wake of the Second World War. As a way to prevent future conflicts on that scale, the United Nations does not directly bring together the people of the world, but sovereign nation states, and currently counts 193 members who make recommendations through the UN General Assembly. The UN's main mandate is to preserve global security, which it does particularly through the Security Council. In addition, the UN can settle international legal issues through the International Court of Justice and implement its key decisions through the Secretariat led by the Secretary General. The United Nations has added a range of areas to its core mandate since 1945. It works throughout areas of agencies and associated institutions, particularly to ensure greater shared prosperity as a desirable goal in itself, and as an indirect way to increase global stability. As a key initiative in that regard, in 2015, the United Article the Sustainable Development Goals, creating common goals for the collective future of the planet. Beyond the UN, other institutions with a global mandate play an important role in global governance. Of primary importance are the so-called Bretton Woods Institution, the World Bank, and the IMF, whose function is to regulate the global economy and credit markets. Those institutions are not without their critics for this very reason, being often blamed for maintaining their economic inequality. So, global governance is more generally affected through a range of organizations acting as intermediary bodies. Those include bodies in charge of regular coordination such as the EU or ASEAN, which coordinate the policies of their members in a certain geographical zone. So, in summary, global governance is essential but fragmented, complex, and little understood. In this context, the key questions raised by the Global Challenge Foundations are how to reform institutions, how to develop alternative institutions, and how to use the new possibilities of technology to improve governance.
Contemporary global governance with integration of COVID-19. Institution under stress. Crisis facility change. The remove obstacle which in normal times. Sustain the status quo. They often straighten existing trends, which may have been slowed down by institutional inertia or political resistance. An event of the magnitude of the COVID-19 is likely to entail serious consequences in domestic as well as international politics. The trajectories of the virus have largely determined the response of COVID-19. Different forms of authority and scales of government respond differently to external threats, but the constant damage put forward by public authorities in most cases have been to flatten the curve and manage contagious in a way that allows public health system to cope with a significant surge of patients. And it is also struggle against time that comes with important social and economic costs. Physical distancing and lockdowns measures have been imposed throughout the world, even if some countries were slow to adopt them. Some in Mexico have been contradictory in their approach. The Brazil have taken a far more and tame approach to Sweden. And next is the global governance and racial profiling. The expansion of the global pandemic emerged with an increment of racializing rhetoric, instrumentalizing the fact that the first recorded phase of the epidemic took place in Wuhan. The virus was wrongly attributed to people of China descent. So in the COVID-19 pandemic, worldwidely experienced difficulty lifestyle. In Philippines, we experience also difficult because of the MGCQ, the home quarantine. So we move limitedly. So the local government is declare the local policies like strictly in motorcycles, strictly in one person only.
Fragmented global governance architecture. Growing economic nationalism is avoidedly linked to an increasingly fragmented global governance architecture. The ways national organization was patiently clear in context of current global pandemic when the World Health Organization found itself in the middle of US-China regarding the lack of recognition of Taiwan's effort to tackle COVID-19. So, in response to the implication, so natin alarm. So, the White House announced with Brazil holding financial support the WHO reviewing its performance. So, the US-China dispute around the WHO reveals the sharpening of ongoing dynamics in global politics, such as the retrenchment of the US, more inward-looking nativist attitude, and increasingly Chinese engagement and protagonism in multilateralism. So, importance of international cooperation with the integration of COVID-19 on global governance. So, the future global challenges demand far better international cooperation, significantly more decisive to avoid worst case. So, given the lack of action in important political bodies in dealing COVID-19, efforts and resources ought to be channeled to be more flexible, technocratic, international organizations that have knowledge to access the proven ability to provide rapid response to unfolding events. So, considering that an organization not hermetically sealed off the political environments which they exist to operate, so although great power competition is likely to be a feature of the global dynamics for the foreseeable future. Importance of international cooperation with the integration of COVID-19 on global governance. Such step would contribute to minimizing the risk of dysfunction embodied and reinforced to current international response to COVID-19. The immediate response of states across the globe to spread COVID-19 has been closed. So borders, however, fundamental factors that will remain relevant information technology, social media. So in considering the theory of professing the diminishing globalization and its worth, so experts to prioritize the international order or a casualty of rising nationalistic leaders to backlash against migration. So, third, it has not prevented to perhaps even encourage continued engagement to more global fora and with contracts around the globe in virtual online spaces, which the risk of sorts of viruses are not those that put physical health in jeopardy.
Effects of globalizations on the governments. Identify the institutions that govern international relations and differentiate internationalism from globalism. So, according to the disciplining hypothesis, globalizations restrains from governments by inducing increased budgetary pressures. As a consequence, governments shift their expenditures in favor of transfer and subsidies and away from capital expenditures. This expenditure shift is potentially enhanced by citizens' preferences to be compensated for the risk of globalization. So we have the penetrations of the global outreach of local entities. So global state and non-state actors are increasingly penetrating those domains which were henceforth exclusively reserved for the domestic state machinery. Not only interfere in the policies formulations but now acting direct through their non-governmental organizations in domestic policies implementation. Centers of actual power and decision making are shifting from local to global level with the outreach of domestic interest groups to their sympathizers in international organizations. Multinational corporations and those in the governments of the power, this outreach enabled them to force their own government to exceed their demands because of the economic and political growth of the global players. So we have the revolutions of rising expectations. So first, revolutions of rising expectations followed the start of the decolonization process in 1950s and 1960s, when citizens of newly independent nation states expected too much too soon from their experienced leaders and bankrupt states. New generations of those old guards now have access to see their lifestyles of the West through media, travel, and demand same rights and amenities from their respective ruling elites. However, these states are still struggling, ruling with their perennial problems of the shortage and the solvency unable to meet their demands. Hence, the periodic uprising of these countries' color revolutions Arab Spring, Iranian, and Spring, etc. So, globalization is a fact because of technology and integrated global supply chain, because of the changes in transportations, and we are not going to be able to build a wall around that. And we must create a kind of globalizations that work for everyone, not just for a few.
Like Cadet Clifford declaring, so effects of globalization on governments. So international borders of the countries, whether drawn by design or by default, have been changing throughout the history for one reason or another. These obviously provide them sanctity but not inviolability. They keep on changing, albeit at reduced frequency. So globalization is changing the nature of sanctity attached to these borders by dispensing with the strict border controls and allowing hassle-free movement of people from one country to another. Governments are themselves converting them into boundaries, rather lines drawn on map instead of borders. So, institutions that govern international relations. So, the United Nations is a intergovernmental organization that aims to maintain international peace and security, develop friendly relations among nations, achieve international cooperation, and be center of harmonizing the actions of nations. So, from the word United Nations, from the word united, it is an other term of connection or allies or being or partner. So main bodies, the General Assembly is the main deliberate policy in making representative organ of the UN or the United Nations. So the Security Council has primarily responsibility under the UN Charter for the maintenance of international peace and security. So main bodies, the Economic and Social Council is the principal body for coordination, policy review, policy dialogue, and recommendation on economic, social, and environmental issues, as well as implementational agreed development goals. The United Nations Charter established the Two-Tiered Council as one of the main organs of the United Nations and assigned to it the task of supervising the administration of trust territories, placed under the international Two-Tiered system. The International Court of Justice is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations. Its seat is the Peace Palace in The Hague or in the Netherlands. The Secretariat comprises the Secretary General and tens of thousands of international United Nations staff members who carry out the day-to-day work of the United Nations as mandated by the General Assembly and organizations' other principal bodies.
Institution. FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, leads international efforts to fight hunger. ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, develops a standard for global air support and assists its 192 member states in sharing the world skies to their socio-economic benefits. IFED, the International Fund Agricultural Development, since it was created in 1977, has focused exclusive on rural poverty reduction. ILO, the International Labour Organization, promotes the international labor rights by formulating international standards on the freedom to associate, collective bargaining, in the abolition of forced labor. IMF, the International Monetary Fund, foster economic growth and employment by providing temporary financial assistance to countries to help ease balance of payment adjustment and technical assistance. IMO, the International Maritime Organization, has created a comprehensive shipping regulatory framework addressing safety and environment concerns, legal matters, technical cooperation, security, and efficiency. ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, is the United Nations Specialized Agency for Information and Communication Technologies. UNESCO, the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, focuses on everything from teacher training to help improve education worldwide to protecting important historical and cultural sites around the world. UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, is the specialized agency of the United Nations that promotes industrial development for poverty reduction, inclusive globalization, and environmental sustainability. UNWTO, the World Tourism Organization, is the United Nations agency responsible for the promotion of responsible, sustainable, and universally accessible tourism. UPU, the Universal Postal Union, is the primary forum for cooperation between postal sector players. WHO, the World Health Organization, is the directing and coordinating authority of international health within the United Nations system. WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, protects intellectual property throughout the world through 23 international treaties. WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, facilitates the free international exchange of meteorological data and information and the fosterance of its use in aviation, shipping, security, and agriculture, among other things. World Bank. The World Bank focuses on poverty reduction and improvements of living standards worldwide by providing low-interest loans, interest-free credits, and grants to developing countries for education, health, infrastructure, and communication, among other things.
So internationalism versus globalism. While internationalism lays stress only on the solidarity and cooperation among the nations while acknowledging their sovereign character, globalism, on the other hand, not only emphasizes the dilution of the sovereign expression of the nation but demonstrates the conflicts arising out of this dilution as well. What is internationalism? So it is a political principle which transcends nationalism and advocates a greater political or economic cooperation among the nations and people. The principle of cooperation among the nations for the promotion of their common good, sometimes as contrasted with nationalism or devotion to the interest of a particular nation. So what is globalism? Globalism is an ideology based on the belief that people, goods, and information ought to be able to cross national borders unfettered. A socio-economic system dedicated to free trade and free access to markets. Term used to describe how trade and technology have made the world into a more connected and interdependent place. Globalization also captures in its scope to the economic and social changes that have come about as a result.
Good day everyone, so I am Cadet Thaddeus Prihan. So I am discussing the difference between the globalism and the internationalism. No? So the objective of this video is to get the difference between the globalism and the internationalism, and then how global governance affect in marine industry. So let's start. So in global governance, in internationalism, so internationalism is the country or many country agreed, one or too many country agreed to work together, no, for the good of all. No, so like for example, the United Nations. No, United Nations or they are building, no, many countries agreed for the sake of all. No, or in marine industry, we have example the Panama Canal. No, they are agreed to build the Panama Canal for the sake of all. No, so that's the first thing. So next is the globalism. No, globalism is one or two countries get together to take one leader. So the best example is the China Sea issue of the China Sea and Philippine Sea. No, so we are they are trying to get the attention of the unity of the Philippines in other alliance. No, so next is the global governance. So how affect in marine industry? So how can affect? So marine industry is the biggest role, no, marine industry in the biggest role of the in the world. So if the marine industry can't operate, the economic of the world or the state would be decreased.
The impact of globalization on shipping and maritime industry. Globalization has involved with a realization that resources and goods are not always produced in a location where there is an actual need for it. A population at another corners of the globe would be in the need of the same products, which facilitate the concept of globalization. This was not possible without having an economically feasible mode of global transportation. While transportation is a major pillar of the globalization, a part of communication, standardization, and liberalization, shipping has been its cornerstone, particularly on the international and interregional trade front. The shipping industry has been a key ingredient in fostering trade, and the maritime industry duly adapt itself with technologies, national registries, and labor resources to fit to the demand of globalization. Maritime shipping. Global goods movement is a critical element in the global freight transportation system that includes ocean and coastal routes, inland waterways and railways, roads and air freight. today port corridors and proving themselves as crucial nodes for foreign transportation network, connecting railways and roadways to the hinterland, especially in the containerized liquid and dry bulk cargo segment, and maritime transportation complements other modes of transportation. Depends of economy on maritime trade. Former chairman in Intercargo Nicholas Papadakis once said, "World trade, world finance, and the health of the world economy are all interrelated with shipping." The maritime transportation system is a network of specialized vessels, the port they visit, and transportation infrastructure from factories to the terminal to distribution center to market. All components together have become integral parts of the global economy. For many commodities and trade routes, there is no direct substitute for waterborne commerce. For the refrigerated freighters and container ships to car carriers and supertankers, the world shipping industry has played an incredibly key role in transporting 90% of the world food, product, and energy, while helping the transform of the global economy. Along the way, each year of 86,000 ships move more than 90 billion tons of cargo, more than a ton of each person on the planet crossing our seas each year.
Impact of globalization on shipping and maritime industry. Shipping connects cost-effective labor markets. Globalization has identified overseas labor-intensive markets which encourage transport of raw materials and intermediate products to places where manufacturing costs were lower. With low-cost petroleum and gas, energy of vessel propulsion, the cost of semi-finished and retail products have substantially reduced. Thanks to international maritime trade, it is common for agri-products to be harvested one continent, shipped to another for intermediate processing, transported to a third continent for final assembly, and then delivered to market. Next, impact of globalization on human resources. Through seafaring is an age-old employment-generating sector. Globalization has augmented absorption of professional and semi-skilled resources from different countries. This has resulted in multinational crews with very specific international qualification standards and crew training protocols in place. Most modern ships are operated by talented international manpower. And next is impact of shipping and maritime industry. Impact of environment. Efforts are now underway to reduce air pollution from ships, which have impacted the flora and fauna to considerable extent. While different nations have their own environment emission control guidelines, the International Maritime Organization is on mission mode to implement a common minimum charter for all ship-owning and ship-operating nations. And next is the road ahead. The intrinsic connection between maritime transportation, international trade, and globalization trends will continue as long as economic wealth continues to derive from consumption of goods and services. A fundamental change, the connection between trade and global economic growth, would require significant changes in population demographics or social valuation of goods and services. The next is, why is the maritime business still operational during the pandemic? Because it is the main macro transporting of goods worldwide, and also it is the main source of importing goods products from country to country. And the ability of shipping services to continue undisrupted to transport food, energy, and medical supplies across the continents will play a critical role in overcoming the pandemic. Shipping companies will need to become agile and adaptive to the changing situation.